Don't want the government to know what you're buying? Use cash. Today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
Welcome back to the show. Rob McMullen, candidate, citizen, philosopher. Rob has created a platform for an anti-globalist think tank. That is, how do we understand what is going on in the world at different levels, work out what we don't like about it and suggest workable, scalable alternatives. You won't be disappointed whenever he speaks, and I'm delighted to have him as a regular contributor to my show. Welcome back to Jason Q, Citizen and Friends.
Thanks so much, Jace. Really appreciate you having me on yet again. It's always a pleasure.
Look, it's wonderful to have you, Rob, and every time that we're able to catch up, we feel like that we're able to expand on the ideas. It's one thing to talk about the news of the day and to understand what the motivations are for things that are happening that all seem to be just against all forms of logic right now, but it's equally as important to play our way out of the paper bag, look into the future, perhaps from 40,000 feet above, and work out where it is we want to go. And that's part of the reason why we do these great discussions, but we also relate them back to real world situations. And of course, there's been quite a lot of stuff that's coming up that relates very much to your pet subject of, and we're going to get onto that shortly, on reciprocity and what it means in a society to be able to contribute and to work together for common goals. But the idea of this give and take, or what's yours is mine and what's mine is mine mentality that we seem to see more and more in the world today is quite a big challenge. But perhaps it's probably a good little conversation starter too, because it's probably the biggest topic of certainly of the last few weeks is the Elon Musk takeover of Twitter. For mine, I don't trust Musk. I think the idea of taking over Twitter and restoring free speech is wonderful, but he's got enough other points on the board that show that he's playing both sides of the fence, and so therefore it's very hard to trust what he's doing. But at the same time, anything that frees up free speech has got to be acknowledged, and it truly shows to me that there is no black and white, but there's a whole lot of grey, Rob.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of theories out there as to why people like Musk do what they do. I mean, I would like to think that he just, sees things from the bigger picture and realizes there is growing tensions and people are really unhappy, and especially conservatives, where they keep getting banned and silenced. There's going to be an unpleasant backlash if they keep doing that, because it just breaks reciprocity so much. It is oppressing a certain political persuasion of people, and that's not going to end well, because it's like a rubber band. You keep pulling and pulling and pulling, and at one point it snaps. Now, is he doing that out of a genuine desire for a better platform for communication, for better dialogue, for better cooperation between all these different people? Or is he letting off a bit of a pressure valve? Or does he have nefarious plans down the road? I just don't know. I'm more than happy to take the wins when they come. I also feel like some people are maybe a little bit too negative, and they're so negative that nothing will ever be good enough. You know what I mean? When you start working around the halls of power and knowing, like, okay, there's that photo with Musk and Ghislaine Maxwell. It's like, yeah, but powerful people all know each other. I mean, it's like, when you and I both ran in the election, and you meet people who are involved in politics. You don't necessarily like them all. You might get photos with people and you don't really know them that well, but you just meet people who are at the same levels that you're at. I hope I'm not sounding naive. I'm just saying I don't want to be too black-pilled either. I don't know what he's going to do. I think what he's done so far is positive. If he stays on that track, whether it's just a pressure valve or whether it is a desire for better dialogue with conservatives, either way, I'm enjoying it at the moment. Twitter is fun. I'm reinvesting in the platform. It's fun again for now, so I'll take it.
Yeah, I think you make a lot of very valid points there, and I think this is the point you can't have. And even though it was fantasy, I think the best ever speech on this was in The West Wing, when the character played by Jimmy Smits, it was Matthew Santos, and he stands up there and he's basically going to become the Democratic candidate for president, and he's the third run, and they've told him that he's got to give up, stand down, and unite the party. It's too divided, and he stands up and he says, "I've been asked to do this, and I can't do it." And he says, "It's not my decision to stand down. down, it's yours not to elect me or to elect me. But I will say this, if you choose a leader, don't try and choose one that's perfect. There is no perfect person. We're all broken. Choose someone that stands for your ideals. And of course, that's when the crowd just goes nuts. And then he goes on to win the nomination and go on to win the presidency. And that was when Democratic leaders were real. And it shows you they're all fantasy. But in that series, but it's very, very important that that's the case. And yes, you are very right. And the other thing I will say about that point that you made about the Ghislaine Maxwell, two things. One, that he insists that he was photobombed, and that might be a way that you can justify it. But on the other hand, there were people that we would meet on the hustings in the election campaigns, and people that you knew had, some rumours against whatever it was. But as a politician to be, you know that you're going to deal with these people one way or another in real life. So why wouldn't you at least have a conversation with them, at least to be able to work out what they truly say? And people say different things in public as they do in private. You might get a hint of something else. So of course you're going to speak to these people. And if someone's going to photograph you doing that, well, that's not really in context with what's going on. So I think that's an important point to make.
Absolutely. It's not evidence against character. Like, a photo in and of itself is not enough for me to write him off. And I made this point with Dave Pello after the election as well, that we saw a fracturing of the political parties to a huge detriment, where I really think it negatively affected our ability to affect change, where there was just such rampant purity spiraling. And there really is a contingent of people who they want to see Masonic imagery in everything. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I think those people are very annoying, and they've kind of just got to go away. I'm sorry if you're listening to this and you're offended, but seriously, when you're trying to affect change and, someone's saying, well, the color of your tie means that you're a Masonic pedophile. It's like, really, it's not a positive contribution, and it hinders more than it helps. And I don't like playing into that kind of thing where people are just so black-pilled. You actually don't get anything done. You don't take the wins when they're there. You're just so upset about everything all the time. I don't want to fall into that. So I'm happy that Musk has done what he's done. If something really changes in the future and he pivots and it goes quite nefarious and oppressive again, okay, we'll deal with that. But I don't feel like I've got the evidence to expect that to happen currently.
Yeah, I think you make a very good point. I want to make this point we're going to throw to the news. I also think that Donald Trump is the master of all media. I think there's no one better in history, the way that man plays. He's not the greatest speaker of all time, but the way that he can move the media and get the media to at least report what he's saying and for people to interpret. But the biggest criticism that Trump faces today is how he's played both sides of the fence in relation to the vaccine. Now, he does actually have points on both sides. He promotes the vaccine. He says the vaccine is wonderful. He denies that it causes injury. But at the same time, he also says that it's voluntary and should always be your choice. Now, the other big thing in all of this is Operation Warp Speed. Now, I think this is the elephant in the room, because on the surface, it says everything that is wrong with the vaccine is because of Operation Warp Speed, the idea that the FDA got to cut its own corners, remove animal trials, cause all these horrible injuries that have all been covered up. Now, that can't be on Trump, but what Operation Warp Speed did for the people is that it stopped the FEMA camps. It stopped the quarantine camps. Now, these quarantine camps were built up all around the world. How they were built in advance, Rob, I don't know how Queensland got theirs up and running so quickly. Like, this was obviously planned years ago. And of course, now that they're all redundant, they've been closed down. So what were they trying to do with these camps? Were they going to put everyone in there who'd had COVID over 7 years waiting for the long form vaccine approach? Was this the torture that they were going to put on the people for 7 years? Or were they going to use it for just unvaccinated people? It didn't turn out that way, did it? So it's a really interesting point that Trump was able to use something that looks like it was against us, but actually served us. And again, this is this whole idea of this black pilling and finding the negative, or what you say, purity spiraling, which is another one of the great Rob terms that we'll put in. Now, before I throw, you didn't invent the term participation trophy generation. That was a ripper.
No.
And also the other one I like is the climate industrial complex. But now we've got three that we can put on T-shirts. So we'll take that news break now and come back with more here on TNT Radio with Rob McMullen.
Matt Boyland here with your TNT headlines. The United Nations has adopted a resolution condemning the celebration of Nazism, despite strong objections from the United States. A fire has ripped through a nightclub in Russia, killing at least 13 people. Ukraine's once again been accused of using US missiles to attack civilians. And as Republicans look set to seize control of the Senate and the House in this week's midterms, mainstream media organisations appear to be abandoning President Joe Biden.
Don't miss a thing. Be sure to download the TNT radio app from either the Apple App Store or Google Play so you can easily listen live to us anywhere, anytime. Available right now to download, keeping you up to speed on TNT Radio.
For those that may not be aware, Rob comes from Queensland, which is on the east coast of Australia, and that sits above New South Wales, where I'm from. But right now I'm going to ask him a question that comes from the state below us, making the three most populous states, and that is from Victoria. Rob, we're now calling him Stairman Dan, as the man who fell down the stair, not the stairs, it has been revealed. Good old Stairman Dan has been caught out yet again in all of this. And the other interesting part of it is that he got himself into the media last week when he decided to stand up and sponsor netball after Gina Rinehart, one of our leading mining magnates in the country, was basically told that her sponsorship $15 million was no longer required because the netballers didn't approve of what her late father, had said some 30 years ago. And there's old Stairman Dan standing up and he says, I'll front the $15 million using taxpayer money. What are your thoughts on this story?
I thought the initial controversy was that they didn't agree with Gina being a miner and into mining and that was an ideological clash with the modern religion of global warming and, mining things is bad because you're going to kill the planet. And so they didn't want to wear her logo. Wasn't that the original controversy?
Yes, and then it, of course, it went further because of an Indigenous lady in the team who, Lang Hancock, the father of Gina Rinehart, had made comments some 30 years ago about sterilisation.
What happened here?
Pitting the two.
So what happened here is classic lefty playbook. I mean, there's a clip on YouTube of Jordan Peterson saying that, we've taken great pains to control and suppress male antisocial behavior, which is usually bullying and direct dominance, but feminine, not women, but feminine type, and all of us can sort of fall into that archetype, but feminine type antisocial behavior usually revolves around reputation destruction. And what you find, uncannily enough, is how much the left tends to rely on, they resort to feminine antisocial behaviours of reputation destruction as a way to force what they want. So what happened there was that Gina Rinehart said, I want a situation of reciprocity. And reciprocity means it goes both ways. And for me, that's the answer to what we were talking about last time about the dependent morality is I think conservatives feel and we understand more reciprocity, which is it goes both ways between equal adults. And she was saying, well, you can't have my money if you hate my company, if you symbolically don't want to show that it came from me by displaying the logo, because you're symbolically and socially saying you hate my company. So that breaks reciprocity. That's not a reciprocal arrangement where you say, I'll take your money, but I won't allow people to understand that it came from you or promote your company. So she insisted on the reciprocity. And what did the left do? They resorted to, okay, well, we're going to cancel culture you. We're going to go and dig up something to try and some social issue to try and destroy your reputation. And that's what they always do. You look at like Matt Walsh, he's come out talking about how they dig through old past examples of him speaking, all this sort of stuff. They go and try to destroy your reputation socially if you don't give them what they want. So really, when I'm saying that we should be trying to push for a situation of reciprocity with the left, most of the time they're more like a blackmail mafia shakedown. Give us the money, give us the free stuff, do what we want you to do, or we're going to socially destroy you, which has flow-on effects for your family, your income, and your business, etc.
Yes, this is the common thread, isn't it? Where all of a sudden the cancel culture wants to play on the way that it does. Very disappointing, of course, that this is the world that we live in here.
Well, I think the answer though is that we need. There's Elon, there's Gina. This is what I was saying: is you need not your Tony Abbott. You need not Tony Abbott, which is your established conservative that just puts his hands up and goes, "Well, I guess it'll all sort itself out. I don't understand. This is all silliness. It'll go away." What you need is people with power and money to say, "No, you're doing the wrong thing, and I'm going to impose some consequences on you." Because you're actually mistreating people. That's what I want from people. And unfortunately, people like you and I, we have limited resources to be able to survive the counterculture.
Yes.
But, what I love about people like, say, Clive or Gina or Elon is they actually have the money to say, no, this is wrong. A lot of what they do is criminal. They're criminal shakedowns. They coerce people. So, your functional left these days is criminal. And unfortunately, because they've taken over the institution so much, we have limited power to fight back against that and to stop the criminal behavior. But what I love seeing is someone like Gina with the money to survive the cancel culture just say no. But unfortunately, it highlighted another issue, which is, like I said to you a couple of shows ago before, a lot of the left, because they have control of the government and the money printing, they are thinking they're running a successful business, but what they're actually doing is just hyper-consuming. They're off gambling the fortune, the family fortune away in Vegas, thinking they're running a successful enterprise. And so that's all that really happened is the government with taxpayer money, which they, collect. It's not voluntary, let's say, and the money printing and all that sort of stuff. They've basically got the big wheel of government that can fund their pet ideological projects. I mean, in a sense, it's good to sort of see that split where Gina goes, well, I'm a private enterprise, private business, as I explained before, runs on reciprocity, mutual win-win values, and I want that. But you can see, as in so many things, where the demand for reciprocity, the demand for cooperation, the demand for mutual respect cannot be met by these ideologues. They run to the government to get our money from our, the back door of taxation. It's good that it's highlighted, but, it does also highlight another problem. That's why they get away with so many things, because they have control of the money printing.
Indeed. So reciprocity on its own is a really good explanation, and as we've talked about many times on the show, but relating it back now to, as we always do, the entitlement era, whereby this explains why there's such a shortage of skilled workers today when there shouldn't be. But we've now got a situation that one thing that COVID did was it gave everyone a much needed rest from the day-to-day mundane 9 to 5 work till you die mentality, and so many people realised that they didn't want to go back. The problem we have is now that it created a generation of the participation trophy generation, whereby now they feel like they're entitled because they are incapable or don't want to work, that the government will always foot the bill. And of course that goes against reciprocity because there's no social contract anymore. It's just gimme, gimme, gimme. I had a politician, Dutch MP Terry Bourdet, on the show last Friday, and we talked about the idea of an incoming basic income. And what that would do is it's like a declaration to the government to say, I want my basic income now. But what it's really saying is that I'm making myself a redundant human being, which suits Yuval Harari's idea that humans have made themselves redundant. They're no longer worth anything anymore. So if you accept a basic income and you think that's a great idea, the government's going to pay me $500-$600 a week or whatever your currency is, and you can buy your basics and live a modest lifestyle, without contribution, you become a burden. And we've all seen what happens when the government realises that there's too many people. They allow things like mRNA vaccines to be invented, and no one is allowed to comment on them at all. And you just are becoming a sitting target. I find it very, very disturbing, but it all circles around to the same story. So in other words, if you're not buying into the idea of what Rob's saying, reciprocity sounds too difficult. Realistically, it's the only way it can actually work, but it's also the best way that it does work, Rob.
Well, that's right. Look, so just to frame things, in terms of the last chat we had, we talked about the strategy of the dependence. The strategy of children is from each his ability, to each his need. You've got it, I need it, give it to me. But that is really that entitlement and that assuming you automatically have value to other people. That's the mindset of a dependent. That's the mindset of a child. And that's been one of my big criticisms. They're actually infantilizing people so much. Now, when you're talking about adults, say, in business, it's like, I don't really care what's going on in your life. What are you going to do for me? What can you do for me? What positive value can you bring to my life? And I don't want something bad to happen to you if it can't, but you're not going to get my money. You have to earn it. That's what earning is. It's a positive win-win mutual cooperative increase in value. And the thing is, it's to some people, if that sounds heartless to you, I'd say that you're underdeveloped. Because, and this is why it's important, is reciprocity. And look, philosophically, we go into this very technically in that it has to be voluntary, fully informed, warranted, free of externalities and the costs of others, and productive, which means, is something voluntary? Are people choosing an interaction? Are you warranting it after the fact? You can't just buy a car and then it breaks down a month later because you did it dodgily. Is the person fully and exhaustively informed? Are you playing any tricks? Is it productive? And productive is a really important criteria because, if you're blackmailing someone with some, pictures of them in the shower, they might be voluntarily and fully informed giving you money, but they're running away from a negative value. They're running away from a punishment. You're coercing them with a negative consequence. It's not a productive. You're not adding value to somebody's life. And then the last criteria is it free of externalities on other people. We can go into it quite technically, but at the end of the day, it is important because it's the only morality that can scale beyond the interpersonal.
Yes,
and that's what's really important, because when we have a big functioning society, say you build a house and it's a brick house, you need strong bricks. For it to stay up. Like, it's just really basic metaphor. You need nice, strong bricks. House is going to stay up. It's a solid foundation. And now according to that criteria, reciprocal interaction between people is like a strong brick. It's what we call like a stable relation or a stable relationship. And in other words, that just means a way of interacting with other people that's not going to make them unhappy. Because when people get unhappy, they get more unhappy and they get more unhappy, and then they look for other ways to start retaliating. And if you make them really, really, really unhappy, they really, really start getting more of an incentive to retaliate, and not in obscure ways either. So you know what I mean? If we want a functioning society at scale, we need to be cooperating. We need to be interacting with other people in ways that keep everyone as happy as possible. As much mutual win-win interaction that we can do. And what's happening now, though, is, with someone who's very conservative values, it's almost like I can't even be honest with a lot of people about what I want, about what would make me happy, because then, you're shamed and bullied and coerced. Well, I'm not in a situation of reciprocity. I'm essentially, coerced and blackmailed. And a lot of us are in that situation. And it came to head with the vaccine. The vaccine wasn't a reciprocal arrangement. And so for me, it's an important concept to grasp. Reciprocity is because when you have lots of different people wanting lots of different things, that's going to be the only equal sign you'll find between people. Countries and companies and any organizations at scale have to interact with reciprocity. And so, I'm just saying, as opposed to the dependent, the morality of children that the left have, I'm inherently valuable to you. Societies like my parent, people I don't know are like my parents, the taxpayers like my parents, give me what I want, shield me from competition, subsidize me. And I'm here saying, no, what conservatives need to do, what I wanted to do is say, this is the morality that you feel. This is what you can feel in your gut when you see these people, you say, no, this isn't reciprocal. It allows you to ask questions like, well, what's in it for me? What value do you bring? One of the most important questions we could ask anytime the left want anything, how do you propose to earn that?
Yes.
You know,
very,
what
very
value do you give to other people that is going to earn what you want? And they don't really do it. But and this is the thing is, you know, we live in a very wealthy society. Sorry, did you need to speak?
Yeah, I just need to go to a break, Rob. Otherwise, we're going to bounce into the news. We'll take that now. We'll come back with more with Rob McMullen here on TNT Radio.
De-weaponizing weather with reality and perspective.
Since summer, we've been outlining an analog package based on the kind of hurricane season we were seeing in the Atlantic Basin. You see, when you get late activity, and when we didn't see the activity ramp up in June, July, and August, and it waited till later in the hurricane season, it's a sign of a certain pattern that was occurring. And that kind of pattern that was occurring is one that is conducive for early cold over the eastern part of the United States. And we think from Thanksgiving to New Year's, it's going to be quite cold. But the problem is that when it's cold in that area, it's usually cold in Europe and usually cold in the Far East. That's a problem in and of itself. But think about what the insane energy policies combating a phony climate war have done. They've left much of the world with a shortage of energy, even as the cold season comes along. And the real shame about this, it was all foreseeable. It was right there. We've said it several times, and unfortunately, it looks like it's going to be coming. This is meteorologist Joe Bastardi, your climate and weather watchdog for TNT, asking you to enjoy the weather. It's the only weather you got.
I'm Ben Affleck, and I want to thank you for joining me and supporting Paralyzed Veterans of America.
I'm a quadriplegic. I'm definitely at risk.
I'm very concerned about would there be a bed for me? Would there be a ventilator for me?
Join me and help fight for them by supporting Paralyzed Veterans of America.
They're making sure that we have all of the food and supplies that we need right now.
To find out how you can help, please go to helppva.org. That's HELPPVA.org.
Claims that renewables are cheap or will lower prices are proven false. Today's News Talk, TNT Radio.
And we're back. Rob, let's relate reciprocity back to the spoilt celebrities that are deciding now on a daily basis to quit Twitter. How does that work in terms of explaining reciprocity, that they are objecting to having to pay for the blue tick, objecting to the idea that Musk is allowing on the dangerous people, but really what they're saying is that they can't function outside of an echo chamber?
Well, absolutely. They're willing to dish it, but they can't take it. And, you know, someone who's talking politics on the social media since, for quite a few years now. I remember, you know, conservatives were really, the smart ones were very, very difficult to beat in an argument. And that's why Facebook started banning everything, because, you know, in forms of open debate, a lot of everything the left believes, I'm saying everything they believe, and you can challenge me on this, put me on a stage and debate this, but it will be an emotional story to cover of truth about reality that they don't have the emotional maturity to handle. Everything. Everything. And so whenever you argue from because once again, conservatives, we're like, you know, the cell walls, you know, we're kind of like the barrier between reality and the wishful thinking of the dependents, you know. And so what's happened is that we say, well, you can't just have a society of dependence because it's going to have this effect. But the left are like, well, why not? You know, why can't we have this? Why can't we? They're like, you know, children sort of stamping their feet. And you find a lot of things about conservatives, they're proxies for natural limits. They're proxies for the realities of the world, you know. And we say things don't work like this, you know. You can't just create a society of dependence. You can't just create go over that critical mass of people that think that society is their parents, because then you won't have a society. But that's just talking about a natural limit. Conservatives feel that. But once again, so I'm getting off track. But they're very emotional. And so in without an echo chamber, they can't really sustain their beliefs. And so they can't function in a state of reciprocity. They don't like it because they get challenged. I think they need to get put through it involuntarily, because that challenge is growing people up, is making adults.
Yeah, indeed. It's quite extraordinary, isn't it, when you look back at just how obvious all this really is, and yet it's so far from reality. That's why I just can't get past over the weekend this idea that we're living in the Truman Show. It just becomes more and more difficult in all of this to see where we go. Now, we may have lost Rob here on the net. We're going to give him a buzz back and get him back on the phone, so we won't be far off there. But one of the things that I do if I have time with Rob is I want to get his take on the no amnesty. We will get him back on the phone just in a moment. But no amnesty is the story here from Emily Oster that you may have read up on or seen on social media, this article in The Atlantic. I will be addressing it at the opening of my next hour in reference to Amazing Polly. Have we got you back on, Rob?
I can hear you, Jase. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you back. That's great. No amnesty, the story of Emily Oster and The Atlantic coming out there and asking for a pandemic amnesty. This, to me, is the ultimate insult from the perspective that they think that it's totally relevant, that they can do whatever they want to us, and when the roles are reversed, they just got unlucky and we just got lucky. What's your take on this story?
Well, once again, like I was saying, they're trying to break reciprocity, because as I said, there's pretty specific criteria. I'm talking technically, and almost like a philosophy, but more like a legal philosophy of reciprocity. Voluntary, fully informed, warranted, productive, free of externality. Was what they did voluntary? No. Was it warranted? No. Was it exhaustively and fully informed? No. Was it productive? No. Was it free of externalities? No. So in every criteria that I'm talking about, they committed a crime. And so you can just see them. Look, but this is my whole point, though. Criminals don't usually hand themselves in. It's up to other people to go find them and arrest them. And I'm saying that it needs to be conservatives to act as those sheriffs that go and find the criminals and put them to justice, because I don't think they're going to learn it themselves.
And this is the big story, isn't it? So now we relate it back to, and this is the very funny thing in terms of the timing. So this week we've got the midterm elections, which may well be an interesting take on the Victorian election with Dan Andrews down there in Victoria. And we're noticing that there are starting to get a little bit of traction now. Our party, the United Australia Party, with Jeff Shaw, the former Liberal member of Parliament down there, leading now the UAP to the upper house. This could become very interesting. What are your thoughts?
I think it's great. It's what needs to happen. I'm really happy that the party's continuing on, because, like I said, a lot of the things that are happening, they're like criminals who just robbed the bank, and we're sat there being like, don't you think that it's bad to rob banks? And they're like, well, they're like that meme, rubbing their tears with their money. You know what I mean?
Yes.
We need conservatives, people who understand reciprocity, people, and you see this a lot in the business community, because business or at a certain scale where it's still a free market, it largely organises via reciprocity. So you kind of intuit this a little bit more. We need to organise. We need to hold these people account, and we need to say, according to these criteria of reciprocity, you've committed crimes. I will say, though, I did hear a take on this, which I think is probably true. The Atlantic article wasn't so much about them asking us to forgive them. That was about them telling themselves that they forgive themselves. I think it's maybe a little bit too charitable to think that they cared about our opinion that much. But I am glad to see the organisation is still going forward. I'm glad that UAP is charging ahead. I know Malcolm Roberts is charging ahead. And next time, I'd love to talk to you about the organisation that I'm part of. There is a lot of people coalescing into an organisation, conservative think tanks, that's actually happening. And it would be great to get support behind that, because what I want to do, once again, is say we have the moral license, we have the arguments, we have the legal philosophical arguments to say, no, you people committed crimes against us. We need to organise so that we can enforce reciprocity. We can enforce adulting.
Yes, indeed. Now, tell me, Rob, have you got your social media up and running?
Social media, I'm on Twitter. You want to catch me on Twitter and Telegram. Facebook will still delete what I'm writing as I'm writing it. but Twitter's been fun since Elon took over, and Telegram is great.
Okay, and how do we find you on both those platforms?
At the McMullen. So I'm just going to double check that. Yeah, at TheMcMullan.
Yep.
And I think if you search Rob McMullen in Telegram, I should come up as well.
Okay, well, that's MC Mullen, Mullan, Rob McMullen. That's Yep. That's an easy one to find you on both Telegram and Twitter, and a great way to engage. And the more the merrier. And this is all part of the think tank. This is not about just fighting on a level to get to fight our way out of the paper bag. It is also to set up our future in a way that works for all of us. And reciprocity seems to be the basic key that we can start with and scale to. Rob, great pleasure to speak to you again. The time absolutely flies in all of this. I look forward to speaking with you again in a few weeks' time. All the best to you. Coming up after the break, we're going to hear from Darren all the way from Plymouth, and Professor Chen Hong will be with me for a very, very revealing conversation here on TNT Radio.